Neuren pharmaceutical shares have been in the spotlight this week after announcing a major regulatory breakthrough in Europe for its lead drug debut. If granted, it would be the first therapy approved for neurobehavioural symptoms of Rett syndrome in the EU. Earlier, I caught up with Chief Executive John Pilcher.
Delighted with this outcome, especially for the Rett syndrome community in Europe that have never had an approved treatment up to now. I said back in February when it got rejected that it was the wrong conclusion they'd come to. Here we've got a drug that's been on the market in the US, approved by the FDA, on the market for 3 years, lots of great real-world experience that's been formally collected. So, we felt it was the wrong outcome, but there was an appeal process, which Acadia, our partner, went through. But, historically, probably 20 to 30% chances of that succeeding. So I think it's a fantastic outcome that it has been changed to a positive recommendation. And I think, credit to Acadia for their determination in that process, but also to the Rett community whose voice was certainly heard, I think. And it's a really great outcome for them. So, we now proceed hopefully to approval. The European Commission has to ratify that recommendation, which they have 67 days, I think is the precise number of days to do that. And then following that, Acadia would launch the drug. So very, very exciting for all stakeholders.
As you mentioned, still needs to be ratified by the European Commission. Given the initial reluctance to make a recommendation on this, do you have some concerns that is going to be the case?
Yeah, no, I don't. It'd be very unusual for them not to ratify a decision by a recommendation by the committee. Very unusual, and it's no less unusual in re-examination situations. So no, we're pretty confident it's going to result in approval. And as I said, we should get that within a couple of months from the decision.
John, as you say, this follows obviously you've got the approval in the States, so you commercialised debut there. Would a positive outcome here in Europe potentially open up other markets?
So look, there's already another market which is quite well advanced in the regulatory process, which is Japan, which is a very substantial, attractive market. Acadia had to run just a very small clinical trial in the Japanese population to supplement the application there. That's the rules in Japan, and they're well through that. That's going to finish before the end of the year, and then they file for approval next year. So that's following, hot on the heels of Europe. But I think, Europe and Japan are the most attractive markets outside the US for these orphan drug markets. And Europe itself, it's a great economic outcome for Neuren. So we have a $35 million milestone payment that will be due to us following first commercial sale in Europe, which we expect to be Germany, will be the first country that Acadia launches in. So that's not far away. And then we get royalties on all sales, and the royalty rates are actually higher in both Europe and Japan. They're higher than they are in the US. So, it's a great economic outcome for us. And as I said, one which appeared unlikely just a few months ago. So we're very happy.
John, can you just explain that arrangement you have with Acadia? You've licensed debut to it globally then. What's the commercial arrangement you have with Acadia?
Yeah, so it's very good for us. We don't have any expense at all. So Acadia does and pays for everything, and we derive income from sales basically. So royalties on every sale at a sort of a range of percentages depending on the size of the sale. So it's between 10 and 14% in the US, but mid-teens to low 20% outside North America. So that's very lucrative, and as I said, 100% margin to us straight to the bottom line. And then we get these one-off milestone payments to supplement that on things happening, so like the first commercial sale in Europe. And then there are sales milestone payments. So as sales in a year hit certain hurdles in both the US and other markets, including Europe, we get one-off payments supplementing the royalties. So, those sales milestone payments could be up to 170 million in Europe. And in the US, the next one of those is a $50 million milestone payment due when sales hit 500 million in a year, and they're not far off that this year. So, again, it's been massively, financially transforming for us, really since the drug was approved, for the US being the first market. And Acadia's done a great job, and we've derived, amazing economic benefit from it.
John, can we just back up for a moment for those unfamiliar with what you're seeking to treat with DAYBUE in terms of Rett syndrome, what it is and how your product works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rett syndrome, a devastating neurodevelopmental disorder, so where the brain doesn't develop properly due to a genetic abnormality, and the kids really, get impacted just about everything that they do. So walking, talking, sleeping, eating, breathing, hand use, cognitive function is all impacted. So real severe impact on them and their families for life. So what our drug does is harness the power of a growth factor in your brain called IGF-1, which is involved in the normal functioning of the brain. So the way the brain creates new connections between the cells and the way those connections are maintained. And so both of our drugs actually are trying to make that IGF-1 in your brain work better, so improve that connectivity so you can improve across this range of symptoms. And that's certainly what we've seen happening in the real world. So it's not a cure, it's not changing the genetic abnormality. It's a treatment for life, but it's certainly having impacts that can make a great deal of difference to the lives of these patients and their families.
And John, while we have you, can you give us an update on your second drug candidate there, NNZ-2591? So this is in development, and what you're seeking to treat multiple neurodevelopment disorders.
Absolutely. So here we're effectively trying to do the same thing again. So and we think that second drug could treat multiple syndromes. So with these neurodevelopmental disorders, there are many different genetic abnormalities, and they all result in quite a similar outcome, but they're all called different syndromes. We think we can have an impact across a number of them. The first one is Phelan-McDermid syndrome, and we're right at the end of the journey for that. So we're in the phase 3 trial, so the last trial before we would file for approval in the US. So that's happening as we speak. It's called the Koala trial. It's happening in the US and Canada, and we need to have 160 kids trialed in that trial, and we're by the end of this month we should have most of the sites open, and we expect a big acceleration in the number of patients coming into that in the coming months. So very exciting, and the whole idea of us executing this trial is that we're taking this a lot further than we took DAYBUE before we handed it to Acadia. So that means you can extract a much bigger share of the value. So that's the whole thing with Neuren. I always say you can get the best of both worlds. You've got this cash generation asset with 100% margin, but then you've got the big upside of potentially doing it again on a bigger scale and keeping more of the value. So it's a very important part of our strategy. And as I said, we are inching our way to the end of that journey.